Charlie. We ending the year on a series that we've been doing all year long on the 12 disciples. Each month we've done a collaborative preaching series with a couple of the preachers in the area on the 12 disciples. So this will be the last one on the disciple that we have left. Reaching the end of a job interview, a young engineer just out of MIT was asked, well, what kind of starting salary are you looking for? And he said, well, somewhere in the range of $125,000 a year, depending on what benefits come with that. And the interviewer says, well, what do you say to a package of 5 weeks vacation and retirement package equaling to 50% of your salary and a company car leased every 2 years? I bought a new Corvette. And the young guy looked at him and said, are you kidding? And he said, yeah, but you started it. We talked our Christmas lesson last couple of weeks was on labels that people are given. We talked about Rahab the prostitute and Matthew the tax collector. And we do this to people, right? We label people. We label them, or we create expectations for them, and we do it based on when we know nothing about them. We know very little about them. We have a habit of wrapping people in a nice little box. Somebody with some technical knowledge, do something to the board back there, please. Yeah, I can hear my own self echoing. So we label people, and we put them in a box. And so politicians are all the same. All right? Okay, well maybe that's one that's a little bit more accurate, right? And if you're an alcoholic, if you're an ex-convict, that's your label. You get labeled with that, and that's just who you are. And we look at the state of people's lives, we look at their jobs, we look at their homes, and we make value judgments about them, right? And today we're finishing up the series on the 12 disciples, and we're looking at a guy who was forever labeled by one incident. And that's pretty typical with what we do with people. We label them by something that happened. Thomas the doubter. See, you all know Thomas the doubter. We say his label is so familiar and so ubiquitous that he has a term in the dictionary. You can look up a doubting Thomas in the dictionary. Doubting Thomas is a person that is skeptical. It's a person who refuses to believe without proof. A doubting Thomas. And there's no doubt that Thomas earns that label in some way. The most detailed story that we have about him is in the Gospel of John. And it makes clear that he's got some skepticism. So in John 20, it says, one of the 12 disciples, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, was not with the others when Jesus came. They told him, we have seen the Lord. But he replied, I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, put my fingers into them, and place my hand into the wound in his side. 8 days later, the disciples were together again, and this time Thomas was with them. The doors were locked, but suddenly as before, Jesus was standing among them. Peace be with you, he said. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here and look at my hands. Put your hand into the wound in my side. Don't be faithless any longer. Believe. My Lord and my God, Thomas exclaimed. Then Jesus told him, you believe because you have seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me. You notice until this incident, his nickname is the twin. That's sort of been his label as a twin. After this, he's a doubting Thomas. Right? That's what we all knew, Thomas the doubter. Despite whatever else he said, or no matter what else he did, and really despite not acting a whole lot differently than the rest of the disciples, to this fanciful, supernatural, hard-to-believe circumstance that's taking place here, he's labeled by this one reaction. And we remember him and we define him by this one chapter in his story. Of course, it's clear that he doubts, right? I mean, you see that. He doubts the resurrection. He goes, wait a minute, I need to see. I need the physical evidence. But he's not alone. Every disciple had doubts. Why were they all gathered together in the room? Are they gathered together and in this locked house? When it says the doors are locked, are they locked together in this house because the women who had already seen Jesus had told them that Jesus was alive, and now they're celebrating and they're feasting his resurrection? Is that why they're all together in this room? No, they're not together celebrating. They're scared. They're locked in this room because they're afraid of the religious leaders.'re afraid that they've got to all stay together. The more of them together, safety in numbers, right? And they're afraid. So every time somebody's walking past their door or a knock happens on the door, oh, that's the soldiers coming to get us. The soldiers are coming to get us. They're afraid. And look, what's the first thing that Jesus says to them? He says, peace. Be calm. Don't be afraid. Calm down here. They're not loudly praising here. They're huddled together in whispers, trying to keep their fear at bay. Fear protected by the locked doors that they're hiding behind. They're not a whole lot different than Thomas. Thomas is the one who voices the doubts and voices the fears. He's the one who brings the harsh reality of the situation up to the surface, and by doing so enables Jesus to wipe away the doubts and fears that they have. Thomas gets labeled, but really he represents every disciple's doubts and fears here, and our doubts and fears that we have. All the things that we struggle with. Maybe we don't struggle with knowing that God's there. Maybe we don't struggle with the fact that God was resurrected. Maybe we do. Maybe we just don't understand it. How can that happen? But all of these disciples could have been Monday morning quarterbacks. They knew the playbook. They knew that Jesus had turned to the last earthly chapter of his own story and told them the way it would go down. Look, he had told them several times. One time in Matthew he says, Jesus is going up to Jerusalem, and he takes the disciples aside privately, and he says, listen now, we're going up to Jerusalem, where the Son of Man is going to be betrayed to the priests and the religious leaders, and they're going to sentence him to die, and they're going to hand him over to the Romans to be mocked and flogged with a whip, and he's going to be crucified, but on the third day, he's going to be raised again. Seriously? How much clearer could Jesus have been with the game plan? And yet, here they are, witnessing everything happening the way that he's saying it's going to. Everything he says happens, right? They beat him. They brutalize him. They put him on the cross. Everything happens. This is all part of the package deal. This is an offensive strategy designed by God and kept hidden from the supernatural powers in the spiritual realm so that they couldn't stop it. This is all part of it, and the resurrection is part of the package deal. Jesus coming into enemy territory to take back what is his. He didn't just tell them all this once. He told them this many, many times. He didn't want them to doubt. He didn't want them to fear. He didn't want them to lose hope when all of these events would occur. Don't fear. It's part of the plan. The resurrection is coming. Yes, it's going to be difficult to see Jesus die. It's going to feel like everything's over. But the resurrection is in the cards. Of course, he also told them at one point in John that people are going to persecute you. And they're going to seek your life. They're going to want to kill you. So maybe this is in the back of their minds too. Hiding behind locked doors in fear. Hope is gone. Instead of sitting in that room excitedly waiting for Jesus to come through the door, they're locked behind doors in fear. And Thomas verbalizes this doubt and this fear. But the other disciples are the same way. Look at his appearance to them in Luke's gospel. The way that Jesus appears to the disciples in Luke's gospels. And I want you to remember, as we read this, the disciples had already been told 3 times that Jesus was alive. All right? And in the chronology of Jesus' resurrection, he appears to different people. He appears to the women. He appears to the men on the road to Emmaus. He appears to Peter. And at this point, he's already appeared to these people. And the disciples have been told, Jesus is alive. Now, I want you to imagine, your son or your daughter, or somebody extreme, your wife, your husband, they're died. And a couple people are telling you, well, I saw him alive. And you're going, yeah, really? Seriously? Come on. So this is where they are, okay? Just as these are the Emmaus disciples, just as they were telling about it, Jesus himself was suddenly standing there among them. Peace be with you. Calm down now. He said, but the whole group was startled and frightened, thinking they were seeing a ghost. They've already been told before this that he's alive. Why are you frightened? Why are your hearts filled with doubt? Jesus knows. They're full of doubt. They're full of fear. Look at my hands and my feet as myself. Touch me and see me. Same thing he's telling Thomas in Thomas's story. They need the proof too. When he said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they still did not believe, because of joy and amazement, he asked them, do you have anything here to eat? Now they're so filled with amazement that this is happening, they still don't believe it. How can such a thing occur? He's back to life. it says they still don't believe. There was no welcome home banner hung up for Jesus. There was doubt and fear hovering around this, and Thomas was voicing that for the disciples. But he gets a hard rap. And we're hard on the disciples even, that they didn't get it. They shouldn't have doubted. We looked at the passage where Jesus told them, oh, you guys should have known this. You should have known it was coming. And we're hard on them. How could they miss it? How could they miss what he had clearly told them? And yet, we tell our kids, well, find out for yourself. Don't believe the rumors. Don't just believe things because your friends say. Make sure it's true before you just believe anything they tell you. This reminds me of a movie, 1957 movie. Maybe you're familiar with it, called 12 Angry Men. How many people have seen 12 Angry Men or remember the movie 12 Angry Men? Only a couple. Like Lynn's raising her hand. Okay, in 12 Angry Men, starring Peter Fonda, it's a jury. He's on a jury, and he's the lone dissenter on the jury. Everybody else wants to vote guilty, and he says, no, I don't know. I have to see the evidence more. I want more proof. I want more evidence. And the whole movie is them sitting in the jury room, and then they're not convinced. No, there's not enough evidence to convict. They just want to go home. Be done with it. Would you just vote guilty so we can get out of here and go home? No. He holds out because he wants to see proof. He wants to see for himself. And we do that, right? We do that in our own lives. We say, no, I need to be sure. I need to see for myself this stuff. And that's healthy. And that's good that we identify things on our own, that we try to be part of the story, that we write our own story. I mean, look, we're relying on the testimony and the writings of men 2,000 years ago. And that's part of why Jesus told Thomas, blessed are those who believe and don't see. See, Thomas and the disciples, they saw him. They saw him. They saw him in the flesh. We experience the resurrected Jesus in a different way, in a transformed way that they didn't. Thomas doubted in some very unique circumstances. The guy, their master, died and raised back to life. And this one chapter of his life, he's called the doubter. This one label, all from that one chapter in his story. But there's another chapter in his story that we forget. And it comes just before an amazing resurrection event in Jesus' overall story. This chapter of Thomas's life occurs when Lazarus has died. His friend Lazarus starts up being sick, and Jesus says, well, we're going to wait. So they wait for a couple of days, and Jesus says, well, Lazarus is dead, and now we're going to head back to Judea. Well, the disciples, they don't think this is a very good idea, because when they were in Judea before, they tried to stone Jesus. And they're saying, no, we can't go back. Remember, those people want to kill you, and therefore they're going to want to kill us too. So we can't do this. And they're trying to convince him, don't go. And Jesus is determined to go. And so finally, Thomas says this. He says, let's go too and die with Jesus. Now that sounds like the very opposite of doubt and fear in this statement by Thomas. And notice, he's the only disciple again that says this. The other disciples aren't jumping, oh yeah, let's go, come on, let's go. Thomas has full-on courageous commitment in this statement. But we know him as Thomas the Doubter because of that incident. Thomas realized here that his life is not worth living too much apart from Jesus. Those fantastical supernatural circumstances of resurrection, it's hard to fathom, hard to get your mind around, and that's okay. Paul said that the resurrection of Christ is foolishness to the world. It sounds like foolishness. It's madness to people. So it's okay that he doubts. It's okay that there was some fear. This courageous commitment that Thomas shows characterized his life after he had this transforming experience with the resurrected Jesus. Once he realized Jesus is alive, he bows down in total worship and says, my Lord, my God, you are the God of the universe. And then for the rest of his life, he preaches about Jesus. And he ends up as a martyr. Most traditions we have say that a king of a land that he was in, probably India, was sent some men to kill him, and they speared him to death. And Thomas dies as a courageous, committed martyr for Jesus. Not hovering in fear and cowering in fear in a corner of a locked room, but preaching about the Christ that he had experienced through the resurrection. And we might label and measure people based on what we see, just like we've done over the years with Thomas. But Jesus transforms us, and he enables us to write our own stories, not be hindered and chained to the labels and the expectations that others put on us. We don't have to let the fear and the doubt and the labels and the expectations that others place on us write our own story. I saw a movie recently. It's a good movie. It's an entertaining movie. It came out last year. It's called The Book of Life. There's a lot of little bitty, cool little parallels to the biblical story in this movie. It's a small movie. Maybe has anybody heard of it or seen it? Book of Life. A couple people. The Book of Life. Okay, it's an animated movie. It was small. It didn't have a big budget. A couple of blockbusters came out at the same time, but the messaging behind it is great. It's a Mexican folklore tale, and it's kind of revolving around their celebration of the Day of the Dead. So there's 3 kids in it, Manolo, Joaquin, and Maria, and there's a love triangle that develops between the kids as they get older. And Manolo is tricked into allowing his death to happen because he wants to go to the afterlife and be with Maria. He wants to go where Maria has gone. Maria has died, and he wants to go with her. So there's this whole thing that he's trying to get back to life. He's trying to get back to his regular life when he finds out that Maria is not really dead. And on this journey, they go to this journey that no one's ever made, to this place called the Cave of Souls, where they meet the candle maker. And the candle maker is in charge of all of these lights. And you'll see, I'm going to show you a little clip from this movie. And he's trying to get the candle maker to help him return to the land of the living. And it's really cool listening to what the candle maker tells him here.
It's all here in the Book of Life. Wait, where are my manners? Come on in, y'all.
Manolo and his family were the first to ever see the magic waterfalls that linked all the realms.
Welcome to the Cave of Soul. Mi casa is su casa. This is a cave. You see all these candles? Each one is a life. And I'm your humble, yet strikingly handsome candle maker. I don't get it. Wait. I didn't do the thing. I got to do the thing. Watch this. Amazing, huh? This is our work. This is what we do. Look, that group, that's your town. And there, that's Maria. And next to her, Manolo. One aflame with life. The other, kaput. You see, as long as someone alive remembers you, you get to live in the land of the remembered. Sacagordita, what is it? Cow is on the march. With him comes the end of your town, and there will be no one left to remember you.
Manolo, you forgot.
Please, Candle Maker. Come on, help me go back. Can't do that, no. Santa Chihuahua. Okay. Look, guys. The Book of Life, it holds everyone's story, but the pages on Manolo's life, they're blank. You didn't live the life that was written for you. You are writing your own story.
His pages are blank. When it comes to Jesus, our pages are blank. The red debt, the red ink has been erased. And then he reminds us and he tells us that we are lights. That we are lights in the world. And lights are not meant to be hidden. Lights are not meant to be snuffed out. Lights are meant to shine brightly. Lights are meant to shine and to reflect the light of their Creator. Our story is linked with his story. Our story is linked with Jesus' stories. And he does not look at our labels or the way that we define ourselves or the way that people define us and the expectations that others put on us. Jesus transforms us and he calls us to fill those blank pages with the story that he's erased from our past with a new story defined by grace and love and a dependence on his power and his spirit. In the Same way Thomas casts aside his doubt and his fear, becomes a great, committed, courageous disciple for Christ. Let us, as we go into the new year, let us define ourselves and write our stories based on Jesus' grace and his love and his mercy. And that's what we're invited to now, to take part in his grace and his love as we stand and sing.